evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you for being early arrivals arriving to the libraries for the 17th Behind the Bench panel discussion, which is going to be primarily presentation, question and answers. And my name is Brother Leroy. I've been invited by Brother Cornelius, who is the organizer of the Harlem Library campaign, to host or moderate this evening's program. As a moderator, my position is one of facilitating the flow of information back and forth between the audience and the panel. I would advise us, sometimes we come to meetings armed to the teeth, knowing more than the people on the panel. That's a given, because there's more brains out here than behind that panel, behind the table. So it is a fact that there's more knowledge out here than behind here. However, the individuals who are on the panel, those who are here right now and those who are coming, have specialized in their particular areas. So avoiding sometimes debates, let's look at whatever information we get as adding to what we know, and your question should provoke either expansion on what you know or what has been said, or a I don't know and I'll get it back to you on the part of the panel. Because you ain't asking me, this is the panel. They may have to say, I don't know, I'll get back to you later. But the fact is that this is a community meeting, which means it's for the benefit of the community. Now, the Behind the Bench panel discussions have been organized by Brother Cornelius Ricks, and he can give you his motivations for doing it. Suffice it to say that having had experience myself with organizing panels, it is a terrific or big challenge to keep a forum and a panel going from month to month. And every other week, it is not a light task. However, it's very needed today because our people suffer for a lack of knowledge, or from a lack of knowledge. So the idea is for the panel to share information and for the audience to ask questions that can bring out more and more information as we go through the various law library or behind the bench forums. Get the information and then work with the information. Just don't hold it. We have to share the information that we get, and we have to share the references that we get. I'm always big on doing homework. Just don't even believe what you hear, check it out. Because to sit down and listen brings about the requirement that we follow up on what we hear. And then when we come back to subsequent forums and meetings, we bring more information. Based on what you said on May 31st, here's what I found in Google. Here's what I found in, I went to a court session and I saw this happen. What did this mean? Or based on what you said, I was in court and I saw exactly what you were talking about. This is how we have to grow. This is a must on the part of us. Brother Tony, who was here a few minutes ago, I don't know whether he's left or coming back, but there was a discussion just before 6 o'clock on leadership ability. And those of us who are here, for whatever reason we're here, we are leaders in our own right. The potential for leading is around all of us, especially within our families. But even more so because there are a whole lot of us who do not know how to read, and those of us who know how to read don't know reading comprehension. So a lot of material goes by our people very, very easily. So without further ado, I want to bring forth Brother Cornelius Ricks, who will tell you the foundation on which the Harlem Library series is based. Then we'll introduce the panel, and as more and more individuals come before us who are part of the panel, they will make their presentations against the subject, which is what are the truths facing black men today? Stop and frisk, plea bargaining, tricks, false arrests, etc. Brother Cornelius Ricks.
Thank you, Brother Leroy. It's a pleasure to be here. Usually this room should be packed. One of the things that we do when we put together events like this, we usually get a full house. I guess because it's warm outside, everybody wants to stay outside and build their tent up. But one of the things we're trying to do is basically build a law library in Harlem. And one of the reasons why I came up with that concept, because I was disfranchised in the system. Okay, I was beaten up and told to keep my mouth shut, and I was, a case was fabricated on me. And one of my dearest friends, Judge Paul Curson, was one of the judges that sat on the bench and actually came to my rescue, left the bench and became my attorney. Today he's my attorney, he's the attorney for the law library. He sits in our panel squad behind the bench. And what I find very disturbing is that we have a tendency in the urban communities, I think every black church in America needs a prison ministry and a legal ministry. It seems like when you sit in the church, you got to leave the church to find an attorney to deal with addressing the legal issues. Why should you have to leave the church when you're sitting with a congregation of 5,000 people and you tell me you can't find one attorney in your church? There's a serious problem. Maybe you should get rid of the reverend and everybody else and start all over again. But the bottom line is, like I said before, what we're doing here in New York City is basically building a law library to deal with addressing urban issues within the urban community. We have our own personal issues. There's a brother here just with the movement from downtown, it's called, Occupy Wall Street? I told the brothers, Occupy Wall Street, you gotta occupy Harlem. I said, they're downtown whooping white folks' ass, what do they gonna do to black folks when we get downtown? So my thing is that, I think that they're doing great work downtown as far as like dealing with issues they have to address downtown, but the patent frisk ain't downtown, the war is here. So what we need to do, if they're interested in working with us and they're interested in coming up and seeing what we're doing here in Harlem, what they need to do is come together with us and work with us to deal with addressing patent frisk here in Harlem. And one of the things that's very interesting, I was traveling, and one of the things that we're doing, we got so many different states involved, what we're trying to do with Friends of the Charitable Community Law Library, is deal with issues where these people will talk about, hey man, in New York you guys are doing a wonderful job. We need the same thing down in DC, we need the same thing down in Ohio, we need the same thing down in Detroit. But I said to them, number one, Harlem is the Mecca. And Harlem being the Mecca, we should build a Harlem law library here in Harlem first before we go anyplace else. If someone's going to happen, it's going to water it down. So by dealing with that, we're trying to build something on 126th Street that we're taking over 2 brownstones. And it's going to be called, people call him Cut on Loose Bruce. I call him the Honorable Bruce Wright. He wrote the book called Black Road, White Justice. I had a chance to meet him, and one of the greatest guys in the world. I tell people all the time when I was in Philadelphia, there was another judge down there, his name was William Bruce. And when he walked up on the stage, I was at a court booker, I was on the stage of court booker, and I was on the stage with this particular judge. And what I find very disturbing, everybody was clapping, everybody was saying, cut on loose Bruce, cut on loose Bruce, cut on loose Bruce. And I said, you Negroes should be ashamed of yourself. I said, there were white folks also what they called cut on loose Bruce. The reason why he was called cut on loose Bruce was to intimidate his family. The police department, the mayor, the governor, everybody called him Cut on Loose Bruce. I call him the Honorable Bruce Wright. And he wrote the book called Black Road, White Justice, and that book showed the gray areas in the law. And that's what we're trying to do with the law library. We're trying to show the gray areas in the law where we're being prosecuted. I always say, well, white folks commit a felony by the time we get to court, it's a misdemeanor. When we commit a felony by the time when we commit a misdemeanor by the time we get to court, it's a felony. So we got to change that whole philosophy. And by changing that philosophy, we got to start dealing with teaching people about the law. You call yourself Afro-Americans. What do you know about the Constitution of the United States? What do you know about Africa? My whole point is that what we're trying to do is basically deal with teaching black folks. We march all the time singing "We Shall Overcome," and every time we were under the Giuliani administration, we march with Reverend Sharpton and all these other political people singing "We Shall Overcome," and another brother gets shot 41 times. I guess they told you get over that 41 bullets. We have to stop dealing with marching sometimes. Marching is great, but so long as you give a solution. A lot of times we run to politicians that we need to deal with, especially like dealing with legal issues. Half the time we don't do our research and we don't hold the politicians responsible for what they were put in office for. And by doing that, I find very disturbing, you go into his office and you'll sit down with him telling him about the issues that you have with the law, that you have problems with, and he's the one that wrote the law. So a lot of times you don't need a politician, you need a lawyer. And one of the things they do with Obama, anytime Obama put a bill through that passes, they take it into court. And that's what we should do. Anytime we deal with something in the urban community, forget about all that marching. Find an attorney right away. I always say that with white folks, when a white man has a problem, or you look at him wrong, he's taking you to court. And if you look at me wrong, I'm taking him to court. So my thing is that what I'm trying to say to you is that we, as white people, have to take the responsibility for our community. I was watching a program a couple of weeks ago. I was breaking things out to wait for more people to come, which Brother Leroy is the host of Behind the Bench. And I'm sitting there, and I'm watching this program, and they got 4 white folks sitting on a panel discussing urban issues. How are they going to solve urban issues? Black folks have to take responsibility for the urban issues in our community instead of allowing the white folks to take responsibility for what we do. Right. I always, what happens is I find much more sickening and much more incredible, bring tears to the eyes. Anytime we deal with a psychiatrist, we go to a white psychiatrist, you know the psychiatrist, the white psychiatrist is crazy as hell, more crazy than you are. So you go to him, he crazy, he gonna tell you how to deal with your black issues, okay? What I find so disturbing about that, by the time you leave there, if you wasn't crazy when you spoke to him, you're gonna be crazier when you leave. So the thing is that we have to start dealing with really understanding our philosophy, who we are as a people, and what we have to do as a people, and taking responsibility about education. In this country, you only have in this country, you have 3% of black doctors in this country. You got 12% of black lawyers in this country. It's a disgrace. I was sitting down talking to Judge, I had a meeting this morning, and I was sitting down talking to Judge Daneberg a couple of weeks ago, and he's a House of Court judge, one of the greatest judges you ever met. The reason why I do that, I bring the House of Court judge, criminal court judge, family court judge to Harlem, because I always say that as black people, we be judged in the front of the bench instead of the back of the bench. So I bring the judges here so that black people have a chance to see the human side of judges. A lot of times people think judges are God, they're human just like you are. So what we do, we bring them to Harlem to make sure. Good evening, brother. You were waiting on me. But this brother here is also incredible as well. But my whole point is that one of the things we try to do is by bringing this particular issue into the community itself, is basically being able to call on you. If somebody's in the room right now, for example, and you come to one of these lawyers, and one of the things we try to do, anybody that has legal problems, the attorneys here, a lot of times we deal with people from education as well. If you have a legal problem, what we do a lot of times, we have you speak to them after the event is over. Because if you come in here and you start giving too much information on this microphone, you may be the next thing smoking going upstate. So we got to be very careful about who's in the room. A lot of times, district attorneys also come in, they come in just to check on you and see what's going on. And a lot of times you don't know who he is. He won't even tell you who he is. But what he's doing, he's taking inventory. But the bottom line is that Malcolm said a long time ago, if a black man in America does not, if you're here in America and you're being chased down and you're being beat up and you're being threatened, Malcolm always said, you're doing the right job. And Mr. Farrakhan always said, when you're in a dog fight, you got a pack full of dogs, pick up the biggest brick you can find and throw that brick into that dog pack. And when the one that screams the loudest, that's when you know you hit the right dog. And that's what we're trying to do here in Harlem. We're trying to hit the right dog. And we're trying to make sure that, like I said before, if you called up right now the Legal Aid Society, said the Legal Aid Society right now and said to them, I have a warrant, and what should I do? They would tell you to go to the nearest precinct and turn yourself in. That is the biggest mistake you could ever make. One of the things we try to do with the law library, because by the time you get to court, if it's a misdemeanor, it's definitely going to be a felony before you go before the judge. And you're lucky if you make it to court if it's something serious, okay? So my thing is that what we're trying to tell you with the law library, we will make sure that a lawyer will accompany you to the precinct to surrender yourself. And that lawyer will be the one that will be following you through your ordeal, making sure nothing else is added, making sure that you're that your due process rights are being in place and not being violated. White folks, I don't understand what I'm asking, but I keep saying this about white folks. I say this because it's very true. When a white person shows up at the precinct, there's always somebody there with him. There's always somebody there representing him. We have a problem. We show up in the precinct, we show up in court by ourselves. We find people that we show up in court by ourselves and have the time to get into the law. We're trying to make sure with the law library that we're able to deal with addressing issues that's very important to us, that's more important than anything in the world. I think it's very important to understand that by doing that, that's when they start respecting you. One of the things I've learned in doing the programs we do, when you start to see what happens is that they have a law. Within each state has a different law. But in the state of New York, the lawyers will tell you about that as well. But in the state of New York, you can't personally sue a sitting judge. You can write him over judiciary conduct. You cannot personally sue a police officer in the state of New York. What happens is that we have to change that law. If a cop shoots you down or beats you up, I should sue him for his house, his wife, his kids, his car, his elevator in his house, or whatever he has, even the watch he has on his hand. It shouldn't be a way where these can walk away from being prosecuted. That's why when you start dealing with that stand your own ground law, I find it to be very, very disturbing in down in Florida. They had the same thing here in New York City, stand your own ground. White folks that came into his garage, it was on his property. He was standing his own ground. He still was prosecuted and put in the prison system. He still was locked up. He stood his ground. I have a right to stand on my property. If somebody calls on my property, I have a right to protect my property. Okay? These are things that if a white man has shot a black man or a black child on his property, he would have never been prosecuted. Okay? Look what they did in Florida. You had the march. You had the protest. You had almost had to pick up guns to deal with that young brother that was shot down in Florida. It's a shame how we as a people can be gunned down, shot, hung, pardoned, and feathered, and nobody's saying a damn thing about it. Just like the brother up in the Bronx. The cop came in and kicked the door. And sure, the cop had the right to run in the house, kicking the door because he didn't know who lived in the house. But to shoot that child in the back with no gun was completely absurd. Okay, I find it to be something that we have to do in addressing laws and bringing it to the forefront. I was with the district attorney's office today, and I found it very interesting how they called me to the district attorney's office. And last night, they called me to the precinct. They have a new commander, and the new commander is a very good friend of mine. I've known him for years. And it's very interesting, when he came out of his office, he looked at me and says, "Oh God, what you do now?" I said, "Brother, absolutely nothing." He goes, I said, "I'm looking for the commander." He had like 8 stars here. I knew he was the commander, so I'm messing with him. So the fellow was having the 8 stars there. He drove back, he knows me. He says, "I am the commander." I said, "Oh Lord." He gave a fool a gun. But the bottom line, we joked about it. Good guy, joked about it. He's down here running 4 precincts. He seems to be, his name is Kevin Williams. He seems to be, Inspector Kevin Williams. He seems to be a good brother. He seems to be somebody that's really community oriented. He seems to be really interested in our problems. And these are the people that we're trying to deal with. We have to sue them too. So the thing is that what we're trying to do is make sure that we cannot allow our due process rights and our legal rights, our human rights, to be violated. Because the Tea-Bag Party, if the Tea-Bag Party, that's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, which last you're going to choose. I don't know which one is cool. Whatever, but if the Tea-Bag Party takes back the White House, every Negro in America is going to need a law library. Ain't going to need an attorney. You're going to need one on call. You're going to need one on call. Every time you dial your phone, the phone should be dial 911. It should be attorney. You should just push a button and say it pops up red, attorney. Okay? I want to do something, another power session I want to do called Pat Frisk. If you see something, say something. Okay? They tell you, if you see something, say something, right? With the police department. I'm going to call, every time I see something, I'm going to call on them. So that's one of the things that we got to understand. We got to call the police on them the same way they call everybody else called the police on us. And so I think I did enough talking. I think I made my point very, very clear. I'm glad you brothers and sisters here on a hot day to deal with things that we're trying to address, especially making sure that black folks have the issues they need to address legally. And the brothers on the panel, I'm going to let Brother Leroy introduce brothers to you. But this one brother in the bow tie, which I love so much, he's crazy as hell. But the bottom line is that, if you go to court, you may get more time. But no, he's a great brother. He deals with the issue of patent Frisk. In fact, he put a petition in court. That's what we have to do. We have to address our issues by bringing petitions to court. We cannot allow talking about a dream. My father used to stay on the street corner, and one day, and every time we go get a haircut, I'm gonna get off the floor, but I'm gonna get off the mic. But every time I went to the barber shop, there was a wino, and there was a bump. And what was happening, every time I went to the barber shop, my father would give the wino $5. So one day I said to my father, hey, Pop, why do you give the wino $5 when the bum don't drink? He says, the reason why I give the wino $5 is because he's persistent. Okay, he's persistent in getting that bottle of wine. And what I'm trying to do right here in Harlem is be persistent to make sure that we have a legal law library to address our issues in the urban communities. There are law libraries in the white communities, but there's no law libraries here in Harlem. And if it's not a black issue, the person that tells you it's not a black issue, tell that person to go check in the creek. Okay? So it's a pleasure for you guys coming. I love each and every one of you, and God bless. So much.
Brother Cornelius Ricks, round of applause for him for the work that he's done in this room. And we will move right along. The idea is for the panel, I believe you're supposed to be on the panel. Sister Washington? Your name is down. Your name is here. Okay. All right, let's go. Okay, here we go. We are going to address the panel based on the flyer. The flyer reads, "Stop, Pat, and Frisk. Does it violate the constitutional rights of urban communities? What are the truths facing black men and women in America today?" The panelists can choose to take any portion of that, and the general aspect of what are the truths facing black men and women in America today. I think that's the overriding piece. Stop and terrorize is more of a correct terminology for what we have been conditioned to pick up from the general media. Stop and frisk. It's really stop and terrorize, stop and abuse, stop and psychologically impair the individuals and the community. Well, without further ado, we're going to start with the young sister first. Pronounce your Indigo Washington. She is a community activist, and that means a person who really speaks and acts based on what she speaks and what she feels. There's also Brother Gilbert Marshall, attorney Kenneth Gilbert, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Give me your name. Andrew Marshall. This brother, he gives people money if they don't sign away their rights. Is that right? Is that right? He specializes in false arrest. And he'll have to tell you how you can safeguard your rights and be able to sue for false arrest. You can give away your rights and not be able to do anything. Okay, but anyway, he'll explain that. We also have Brother Antonio Rivera. He is a social scientist. He's involved in education, and at the base of much of our problems is the fact that we are not being properly educated, so that we don't have an understanding in some cases, and we don't have the skills to become employed in other cases, and we tend to be out there on the street without education, without the ability to read and write and figure out for ourselves. So Antonio comes with that specialty, and the other panelist is Brother Nkrumah Kalfani. He is a lawyer based right here in Harlem, USA. So we'll start with Sister Indigo Washington.
Thank you. Good evening, family. So my name is Monique Indigo Washington. Anytime I begin speaking, I always like permission. Ask for permission from my elders to speak, so I ask for permission to speak. Speak. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to add to the conversation a couple of things. I work for the Office of Councilman Charles Marin, And so I've been dealing with legislation for the past 3 years, and I've learned a lot more about what's going on and what we can do from the position of legislation around the stop and frisk. You know, I would leave it up to the attorneys to really go more in depth with what our rights are. There are bills that Councilmember Williams has promoted and put forth. It's really looking to make sure that the citizens of New York City are protected. It's unfortunate that we have to go to the level of looking to introduce more legislation when the Constitution is supposed to already be there to protect us as citizens. So that's key in terms of legislation. I wanted to also share and provide you with information about how laws get passed, because what we're finding is in City Council, there's this tug of war that happens between the Speaker and the City Council, and unfortunately it puts us at jeopardy of not getting a lot of bills and legislation passed. But you as the audience and the community can and should and must play more of a role in order to get legislation pushed. Right now we have, for those who don't know, there are 51 City Council members. In 2009, the last election that took place, this was the time when we, as a people of color, Black, Latino, and Asians, made up the majority. We're now 27 council members. And what does that mean, and how does that translate to power? It means that if the caucus were working as a united front, then they would pass legislation as a block, and they would also support money and funding, and we wouldn't have the mayor being in a position to make all of these different cuts that are happening. And it would also put them in a position of being able to challenge Commissioner Ray Kelly and the mayor. So I just want us to really be clear with knowing that we have a responsibility to be educated about what's going on with City Council. So you can always go on the council's website, which is council.nyc.gov, and that's council.nyc.gov. Because when it comes to the whole stop and frisk issue, you may have seen, I think it was like maybe 3 weeks or so, there was a hearing that took place, and there was a back and forth between some of the council members and Commissioner Kelly. What you did not see were some of the council members challenging Commissioner Kelly. You know, so they always really try, the media shows what they want you to see, and it's always the commissioners trying to put council members on the defense and saying, well, okay, well, if I want to bring down crime, you're tying my hands when you say that the stop and frisk is not working. So a lot of the council members were saying, when it comes to our communities, we want more money. Give us additional funding so that we know how to deal with our children. You know, give us control of the school system. Give us more opportunities to have a role. And therefore, we can be in a position of dictating as opposed to you, the commissioner, and the mayor telling us what we should do. The other thing I wanted to share was, I know, and you probably will go into this a little bit more, we do know and heard that there's a class action lawsuit that is in the works now. And that, for me, that really is key, because it helps us to see what people in the community are doing to fight back. And I would really encourage us to get that message out to young people. Because when young people see that the community and our elders and our adults are taking responsibility to fight back against an injustice, then it will make them not be so angry, and also look to respond to police officers. And I have to tell you, I have 3 children. My daughter will be 25 on Tuesday. I have 2 sons, 19 and 15. I had to send my sons to their father and live in Atlanta, Georgia for the past 6 years. And it's a real concern that women, you know, men, of course, of color, that we have. And I have to tell you, I've been assaulted by the police in 2002. So my fear was that a police officer would put their hands or shoot or something my children. Now, yes, I look at all of our children as my sons, but I just know me. And I was very nervous because my 2 sons are completely different. You know, we have our young males that, for me, they're alpha males. They're the ones that's gonna say, don't put your hands on me, don't touch me, and then something escalates with the police. That's my oldest son. Then I have my youngest son who's not as vocal. He's a little bit more shy and timid. And so all I could think is what I need to do, can do, to continue to raise my voice against this whole situation, you know, to fight back with the whole stop and frisk. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stay for a little while, but I have to get back because my son just came back from Atlanta and he's back here now, so just need to check on him. So I just wanted to really encourage us to be more aware of what's going on in our community. I'm the founder of Take Back Our City, which is calling for legislation dealing with land use and zoning, calling for more community boards to have power, which is something that will stop the gentrification and the displacement, as well as the most important piece. We're either going to do this through referendum or through legislation, and that's recalling. We need the power to recall elected officials. We've reached that point in 2012. It doesn't matter what level, I don't care if it's city council, assembly, or Congress. As citizens, we have to have the power to say you're not doing right by us, we need to remove you, and more importantly, this is so key for us, we have to stop allowing people to jump up and run for office. It's our responsibility to identify people in our community based on their connection to us, based on their record, and say we're going to run you for office, and because we already know the power that office holds, now we're going to send you to office with a legislative and a budget mandate. And that's how we hold that person accountable. So that's my, that's what I'm giving to y'all, to us, that we need to do, and I'll stop it. I love
you. Thank you for your work, sister. Thank you for inviting me yet once again. Unfortunately, I can't be here for the entire duration of this forum, but I am happy to be here and give you some insight or share some of my own ideas with you. First and foremost, does this stop, pat, and frisk violate our constitutional rights? Obviously, it does. In most instances, it does. In some instances, it does not. I mean, it becomes a legal question that can be and is litigated. I do this type of work. Every stop and frisk is not something that I would take to trial. But certainly, I do believe that if the 600 or 700,000 individuals that were stopped and frisked in 2010 had at least, half of them had at least gone to a lawyer and exercised their options, or at least investigated what their legal rights or options were, I think that we would have been further along, because the impact on the controller's office with the money that they have to pay out would have been felt a lot sooner. Certainly we have the class action suit that is going on now, but as you know from hearing about the Vulcan Society's recent $100 million award, invariably what the city does is double down. They're committed to treating us a certain way. They're very vigilant and passionate and persistent about going about the business that's important to them. And as a result, I mean, it's simple physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. You have to be not reactionary, but responsive to what is going on. And how do you do that? You do that by being informed. For the majority of the people that are here, I would say maybe 75% of you are not within that demographic that is the subject of the stop and frisk or the stop, pat, and frisk policy. You may have friends or relatives who are, but you're not part of that demographic. And it's unfortunate that that demographic is not here to receive the information that we're sharing with you today. Be that as it may, we have a duty and responsibilities as leaders and elders in our community to share this information to the extent that you can. I always say this, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, if you have children in elementary school, you should be on the PTA. If you're living in a particular community, you should be attending those community board meetings so that you can know what's going on and what's going on new and what people are trying to do in your community.
so that you can be a part of the decision-making process as to what's going on in your community. A lot of times, when things are, when the building permits are made and buildings are starting to come down, is when we start to protest. And we start to protest at that late juncture because we were not at the planning stage. What Ms. Washington is informing you about, particularly with the land use and the zoning, that's probably one of the most powerful committees in City Council, the land use. I was talking to a good brother, some of you may know, land use and finance. I was talking to a good brother, some of you may know him, Julius. Julius is very active in this community. Right, you know, if you don't know him, get to know him. He knows what time it is. You know, he's at the community board meetings, and he can be very disruptive, not in a negative way, but raising questions and demanding answers. And I think we have to start asking questions and demanding answers. And how do we do that? How do we get from the position of simply being passive recipients of information as opposed to becoming constructively engaged in the decision-making process? We have to move from the 18th, 19th, and 20th century of thinking, starting with the schools, which my brother here is going to talk about, where we're only teaching kids the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Very essential to the foundation of learning. But for 20th century, we have to start talking about 21st century, thank you. For the 21st century, well, some people were doing this in the 20th century also, but bringing us up to speed, what we have to start thinking about in terms of schools. And if you're in the PTA, and you're actively engaged in what's going on in the schools, we're talking about being the 4 C's. The 4 C's being creativity, collaboration. I mean, every subject is not an isolated subject. I mean, if you're teaching art in one class, you could be teaching in your history class, or it should be taught. There should be some collaboration between the art teacher and the history teacher about the art of that period. Thirdly, the 3rd C, critical analytical skills. These young kids out here are doomed if they are passive recipients of information. If that's what they're teaching our young people, then they are going to invariably be the victims of pat and frisk. And stop, pat and frisk is just a microcosm of the social and political milieu that malaise that affects our community. A lot of it comes from the way we are taught to act in society. And it's a function of what is going on in the schools. They kill us when we're young. They kill us when we're young. So when they're impacted with a pat and frisk at 18 and 19 and 20 years old, they don't even know what's going on. Because a lot of young kids that I talk to, after it's happened the 100th time, and only because it's in the media, do they realize that it's a problem. We've been socialized to think that, this is the norm for us, without even questioning it, without even asking questions or demanding answers. Or when you do ask questions and demand an answer, you let them dumb you down and make you think that you don't have any rights, or they use the Jedi mind trick that cops often use to make you think that that this is better than the alternative. Well, what is the alternative? Well, we can put you in jail, or you can submit to this stop and frisk or the strip search. The reality is, and the last C, I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. The last C is communication. Creativity, collaboration, critical analytical skills, and communication. We have to develop with our young people better communication skills. And if the schools that your kids are in are not promoting this type of growth and development, then they are stunting our growth. And the problems of stop and frisk, which again I submit to you is merely a microcosm of a larger problem in our community, will persist. Okay? And that's it.
Good evening. Hot as hell, right? As you all can see, I'm like one of the only other than sister. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a social worker. I'm a formerly incarcerated individual. I'm a sociologist. And I've been working up in Harlem for the past 13 years at Harlem's oldest age service organization. So my started life, my professional started life, and then when I get to HIV. But be it as it may, not being a lawyer, I definitely understand that there's a difference between stop and frisk. And I think we get so used to using those two words as one that we don't recognize that they're two different things. A cop has every right to stop anyone. You don't have any right to frisk anyone. And I think that's one of the confusions that we think if you stop us, you're automatically going to frisk us. As a formerly incarcerated individual, I also know that currently there's 69,000 plus inmates in New York State. I also know that 87% of them return to 7 communities in New York City. And of course, those other communities have got the highest profiles for stop and frisk. All right, so this, I mean, what precipitates the other is like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Because ever since the civil rights, the disproportionate rates of incarceration for men of color is off the charts. And this just isn't exclusive to New York, it's all over the country. It's about social control, and that's the sociologist out of speaking. It's about social control. I'm part of the Charitable Law Library that we're trying to get off the ground with communities. And, you know, first time being a panelist here, I asked him, I said, you know, what's the format? Because I prefer to get a dialogue. You know, one of the things, you know, when you mentioned, when Marshall mentioned that there are no youth here, and that's the highest percentage, that's a damn shame. And one of the reasons why is as adults, we tend to talk to kids, and we don't converse with them. Big difference in talking down to somebody or actively talking to someone and really engaging them in a conversation. So most of my things are going to be brief. Love what you said about communication. I have to look at what's going on in the Harlem community, and I give Vi Higgins all the props. She has that moment, that gospel singing chorus over on 126th Street. And she was on 60 Minutes, and she did her auditions, and there was like 200 kids auditioned for the show. And I think she picked 50 out of the 200. And one of her first exercises was all the kids had to stand up in the front, and she asked them to say 3 basic things. State your name, state how old you are, and where in New York City you come from. And the shame of it is that they couldn't articulate that. They didn't speak where they projected themselves. Like, I don't need a mic, I can talk about a mic, I've been talking about my whole life. You know what I'm saying? But these kids couldn't even articulate. I mean, it was the shyness. No one has ever asked them. They've never been on stage where they had to project their voices and say who they are, how old they are, and where they're from. At least 20 of them bursted out crying. Bursted out crying for a simple task as that. So that tells you that the trauma that we suffer is so deep-rooted that appearances are so deceiving. Right? Going back to the stop and frisk, you know, one of the things it's been in the papers, depending on which papers you read, is going to be the slant that you get on it. But one of the reasons was, what's the justification between for the stops? And the justification, according to NYPD, is furtive movement. Furtive movement, F-U-R-T-I-V. Look it up. All it says is that shady, suspicious, anything. And as they explained it, they spoke about people grabbing their crotch. So you go to the corner, you see 5 guys on the corner, they're holding their crotch. So the cops look at it as you either got drugs or a gun in there. To them, that's enough. I can look around this room and say, damn, there are a lot of shady looking people in this room.
everyone gets patted frisk. So this is the whole concept, that it's such a judgment call, and working up in Harlem and seeing that when the school right down the block was open, you see these young brothers walking with their beige pants, blue ties on, right? And I mean, this was a prestigious school. Rice. You know, ball players came out of this, NBA superstars. And you see 4 white cops pull out a Charger car and roll up on 5 young brothers, you know what I'm saying? And they're shocked, like the way you was mentioning your son, the alpha male comes out. You know, what do you want? Sometimes that little bit of resistance is justification for them to throw you on the floor and do everything else. You know what I'm saying? You know, so the deal is that the justification of what they're using is such a BS justification, and that's what's being accepted. And I mean, obviously, when they talk about it, and I'm talking about NYPD and the mayor, first movement is enough for the black community. And when I say black, I'm talking about the brown community, right? Because I definitely embrace my African heritage. So, you know, so the deal is this, is that we're looking at a society that is about power and control. And we're so disenfranchised that we tend to accept this. We tend to accept the psychological damage that makes us rebel against any type of authority because of the stop and frisk. I mean, the deal is that, you know, just walking down the street, you walking while black, that's justification enough to get stopped by the cops. The social control issue is really big. I was speaking to Brother Jason here, and that's starting the movement. I'm not going to say the Occupy Wall Street movement, because I think based on our dialogue, it's further than that. But the whole deal with that is that when you look at our rates of incarceration, Jason, I missed that. I'm down for any type of book. But the deal is that when we look at our rates of incarceration, what are we returning to? You know, saying the way the education system has a tracking system in it that makes us the workers of the means of productions, and if you go up the scars there, it makes the kids the managers of the means of production. There's definitely an imbalance in our community. No one speaks about that. You know, they'd rather speak about the salaries of the charter schools in our community rather than the output that's coming out of there. They always look at, you know, we're talking about media, we're talking about a slanted media that 50 years ago there was 50-something independent media outlets. Today, media in this country is controlled by 6 different people. That's information. Information is crucial. You know, if we talk about communication, and yes, we're talking about how we communicate to people, but most of us have different learning experiences. Some of us, we have to experience something in order to grasp it. Others have to really read it. Others, you have to see it. You know, but this is what our learning ability is that when we walk down the street, we're prone to getting stopped by cops. You know what I'm saying? It's funny, you know, working in Harlem all these years, after 7 o'clock, I'm looking at white people walking around with flip-flops and pajamas. And I'm like, yo, it wasn't like that before. You know what I mean? This is a comfortability that is just like, you know, so what? But you know what? They're protected, they feel protected, they see what other things are going on, and that's the first stages of gentrification. Gentrification in Harlem didn't start this year. You know what I'm saying? You know, gentrification really with the city planning that takes at least 40 years to develop. So gentrification in Harlem in 2012 was something that people were talking about in the 70s and the 80s. They knew these changes were going to come about. Those, you know, most of us here are Harlemites. Everybody remember the Walt Disney store, the Disney store that was on 125th Street? How long did that last? 2 years? You know what I'm saying? The only people that went in there were the tourists on the double-decker buses. You know, Bowling for Columbine, right? They asked this sheriff out of Michigan, you know, how does he perceive the black community? And this guy had the audacity to say that white America views blacks as entertainment. You know, so they look at us like, you know, how many of us are really talking about the guy, the brother that chewed off this white guy's face out in Florida, right? Yeah, white, right? The guy was white, right? The guy that got this form that he was white, something like that. You know what I'm saying? We're so caught up into those details that we don't think about anything else. That what caused that? But the conversation in my office today was about bath salts. That this is what they were sniffing, bath salt. That you could buy in any bodega, or you can't even call it bodega now, but this is little Arab stores now, right? The delis, Arab delis, bodegas out the window, right? But this was bath salt. Prior to that, they were talking about people having psychosis behind smoking potpourri, which was the K2. You know what I'm saying? You know, and I'm just saying that, you know, a society so desperate for an escape from reality that, you know, when I was a kid, everybody sniffed glue. You know what I'm saying? That was the thing I grew up with. Buy some Prince glue, put it in a foil. I'm speaking from experience. You know what I'm saying? You know, put it in a little brown paper bag and you sniff the glue. You know what I'm saying? But this has taken to another level that people are sniffing bath salt. You know, this is just beyond my comprehension. And I'm a social worker. I deal with people every day. I deal with people who are disenfranchised for a number of reasons. Majority of them are health reasons. You know what I'm saying? But health is wealth. If you can't make that last a lifetime, our rates of death are definitely 20 years premature. Right? There's a great brother coming out of Columbia University that speaks about hypertension. And hypertension leads to heart disease, and heart disease leads to the strokes and everything else. But all of us think we can strive on 3 to 4 hours night sleep. And those are just that's one of the things that kind of leads to hypertension. But the deal is that stop and frisk is only a portion of what's impacting us. You say, without a doubt, we see that's in the media, that's the flavor of the month today. You know what I'm saying? You know, you talk about next week, it may be something else. You know, but one thing that doesn't go away is how we take care of ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Is our health. And I got a staff member here, I got a few people I see in and out my agency, so they know I run a cadre of people that I tell them, the worst thing in the world in ignorance is miseducation. If I tell you something, and any one of us on this panel tell you something, you're going to swear that's the gospel. But if we BSing, that's it, man. We're just perpetuating a lie. So anyway, in short, I'm here for a dialogue. You know, I work right there, right on top of Planet Fitness, and you've got 10th floor, anyone can come upstairs, come into Faces. If you know, if you have a social issue, believe me, we don't work with everything, but we do a hell of a fine referral system. So we can refer you to anywhere. You know, first thing is to get you in the door. You know, people definitely have to step up. Neighborhood Defenders is right down the hall. You know, we're comfortable with them. They've been our neighbors since that building opened up, and it used to be a parking lot. Prior to being a parking lot, I remember that being the Tree of Life. Wasn't that the Tree of Life right there where the CVS is? You know, so you go back years, that has always been a monumental corner. Don't get confused by the marshals and the CVS and everything else. Go into the building, go up to the 10th floor. There are providers in there that can help you with whatever issue you have. All right, thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Stefani Nkrumah. The first thing I want to do is thank Cornelius and thank everyone here for allowing me to sit on this panel and speak to you tonight. I'm a criminal defense attorney. My office is here in Harlem on 111th Street, 116 West 111. I know the Andrew well from Manhattan Criminal Court. When I used to work for Legal Aid. From Legal Aid, I went to the Federal Public Defenders in Florida. And I came back home, and I've been home for the last 4 years in private practice, doing federal cases. I've done everything from terrorism cases down to homicides, and also doing in federal court, and also doing the same thing in state court, and also doing police abuse. Tonight's topic is something is close and dear to me. Not just for the fact that I've been stopped and frisked, and had to tell the police officers that I really do know my rights, and know what they can and cannot do, and when they can and cannot go in my pockets. But for the people that I defend, the little brothers and sisters that come to my office and I see on a daily. I'll tell you a little quick story before I get into my little spiel here about one of my clients by the name of Leroy. This young brother lives up in the 43rd precinct, lives up in the 32nd State Senatorial District up in the Bronx, which is the 43rd precinct near Bronx Road Projects. Has been harassed by the cops for the since I've been home, and that's been 2008 that I came home from Florida. For the last 4 years, I know that this young brother has been harassed by the cops to the point where he had a lawsuit against him because they punched him in his eye and he actually won. Well, the night before Ramarley Graham, everyone knows about Ramarley Graham and what happened to him. But the night before Ramarley Graham was murdered by the New York City Police Department, Leroy was assaulted by the New York City Police Department. Walking out of his girlfriend's building after visiting with his girlfriend and his daughter, the police officers grabbed him, threw him on the floor, and commenced to beat him. After they beat him, they arrested him for possession of marijuana. Leroy had 28 stitches in his face. Didn't resist, did not fight back, laid on the floor and took a beating. 28 stitches on his face. And that's what Stop and Frisk does. See, the thing about Stop and Frisk, first of all, the United States Supreme Court says that stopping and frisking someone can be constitutional, just like DeAndrew said. It can be constitutional depending on the circumstances and how it's employed. But I can tell you, and every time that I've spoken on this subject, and I've spoken on this subject a number of times up in the Bronx, I'm a member of the Freedom Party, our chapters up in the Bronx. We've held rallies against Stop and Frisk. I've been on a number of programs talking about Stop and Frisk. And my take is that Stop and Frisk here in New York City is illegal. Forget about what the United States Supreme Court says. It is illegal. They racially profile us. Racial profiling is illegal. Stop and Frisk is just a part of a whole policy. I think DeAndrew and also Antonio said that. And by the way, Antonio, I've known him forever. Well, not almost forever, but forever. He's one of my boys. I love this brother. And he is an inspiration. Him and my man, Tyrone. We call him Tiger, but his name is Tyrone. Both of these brothers are inspirations to me. Both of them were incarcerated, and I didn't know them before they went in. I met them when they came out. I met the men that they became when they came out. With this brother doing what he does, and my man Tiger doing what he does for the community, and to show other brothers the way that when you come out of jail, when you come out of prison, going back doesn't have to be the option. But there's so many of our brothers and sisters in our community that don't fare as well as these brothers. You know, and part of that is policy. Part of that is purposely done. It's not by happenstance that most of the people in this state, in this country who are locked up happen to be African American and Latino. That's not by happenstance. It's by design. The police policies that we're facing as a community, I always like to say is a response to what we did and what was done by our ancestors in the civil rights era. You know, white people decided to say, you know what? These N people, they got a little voice in them now. They got a little heart. They're demanding stuff. They want equality. They want to live. They want to say that this is their nation. We got to have a response. And not soon after signing the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act bill, the response came mass incarceration of African American and Latino children. DeAndre was right when he said that they start young. They start killing us young. Because when you go to our schools and you walk through our schools and you see the metal detectors in the schools, you see kids. I talk to these kids and they don't want to go to school because they don't want to be searched. They don't want to go to school because they don't want to feel like they're going into a jail. We have schools now that deal with zero tolerance policies that are suspending our children for minor incidents. We have schools today that are closing, that are being closed by a mayor. And I say this, and I know this goes a little off, but mayoral control is a disaster. Mayoral control needs to end, and any politician that supports mayoral control for our community is not looking at what is happening to our children and our community and has to go. The control by the mayor of our schools, closing schools in our community that actually help our children. Case in point, and I don't mean to divert, but it all has to do with what's happening and what's happening to our children, and not just our children, to us. Gompers High School up in the Bronx is an IT school. Kids graduate out of that school with the skills to go into the marketplace for $40,000 and $50,000 computer IT jobs. They're closing Gompers to open up a hotel and hospitality charter school. From a $40,000 and $50,000 a year position coming straight out of high school, where those kids coming out of our community can get and bring wealth back into our community, they don't want that. They want our kids, they want us to be servants. That is their goal for us. So they open up hotel and hospitality schools to teach us how to serve. Someone up here said something about us being entertainers. I always talk about how you don't see Latino and African American intellectuals on TV, but you see the Wayne Wades and the LeBron James, and don't get me wrong, Tim Duncan and the Spurs are my team and we winning it all. But in our community, that's all we ever see. If we're not shucking and jiving, dancing, telling jokes, or entertaining, we're not worth being on, we're not worth being on TV, we're not worth being heard from. It's all a pattern. It's all a pattern. Indigo, another sister that I've known for a few years, and positive sister, she said something that I want to reiterate on that is just something that we have to start doing. She talked about raising people out of our communities and run for office. And that's a great idea. That's the best idea for us to take over empowerment of our communities. Not only do we have to raise people, but we also have to watch what our elected officials do and hold them accountable. And when I say our elected officials, I mean from the top down. I'm talking about from Obama down. We have to start holding our elected officials accountable, those elected officials in our community, because our children are suffering. Our families are suffering. The income inequality. Poverty makes mean streets. Every time Ray Kelly says, "What do I do to stop the crime?" we should say, put money in our communities. We should say, put jobs in our communities that pay living wages. We should say, put education back in our communities. Stop beating our children. Stop abusing our children. Stop criminalizing our neighborhoods. They're painting all of us, not just our children. Because again, I may look young, I hope. But I'm 48 going on 49. And the police are stopping me. In my neighborhood up in the Bronx, they stop you at the stoplights in your car while they're on foot. They're stopping taxi cabs when you get in them, when they're on foot. They're walking down neighborhoods and they don't say a word to the residents in the neighborhood. But they are quick, 5 or 6 of them, to grab you and throw you up against the wall and search you for no reason. We have to say something. We have to do something. We cannot depend on the politicians to say it for us. The politicians in our neighborhoods that stay quiet, they're part of the problem. The ones in our neighborhoods who stay quiet are part of the problem. Those who do the lip service, and you've been getting a lot of it lately. Scott Stringer, Lou, everyone who is running for office, Quinn, every single politician. It's really coming out of Manhattan, because in the Bronx, those politicians ain't saying nothing. Nothing. Out of Manhattan and Brooklyn, they're talking about it, but that's all they're doing. A couple of years ago, they passed the law, took the names out of the database, patted themselves on the back, jumped up and down in Albany like they did something. That same year that they passed that law, we had a record amount of stop and frisk. The year after that, we made a new record. So the law that they passed has done nothing, but the lip service is still there. Us as a community, we have to start watching that. We have to start paying attention to that, and we have to start doing stuff. I'm going on, and I really didn't mean to, but again, I would like to thank everybody for having me here, and I will be here until the end of the session if my colleagues won't, and I'm ready to answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more presenter, and two of the panelists have to move quickly, and we have to be out of here by 5 minutes to 8. So we are on a time schedule, and Brother Larry Bosley, Attorney Larry Bosley, is our next presenter, and he'll tell you who he represents, and then he'll run out of here real quick.
I ain't that tall.
My name is Larry Bosley, and I work for the Department of Education. I'm an attorney, and I have to first make a disclaimer. Anything that I'm talking about or say to you has nothing to do with the Department of Education. They're not supporting it, and I'm not speaking for them. Okay, I'm speaking for me as a private citizen. I was called here today, and I'm sorry I was late. I was working. Brother was mentioning about our students, mostly children of color, being suspended from school. That's where I work. I'm an attorney, one of the hearing officers in the Manhattan hearing office. There are 5 hearing offices throughout the 5 boroughs of the city, and all the suspended students come through my office. In fact, I was working on a case that I had to write a decision about. There are 2 things about that. I agree with what the brother said. There are far too many suspensions for far too many nonsensical reasons. We're constantly talking to the principals and the people at the schools when we get the ridiculous stuff like kid threw a chair across the room. Now, there's an underlying basis for that, and that is if you've got a room full of kids, somebody could be hurt by somebody throwing a chair. However, our position is, look, let's try to get some intervention, have the parent in. If there's an issue at home or there's an issue with the student need to be addressed through an evaluation to determine if the student has some underlying issues that are causing them to behave in a way that's not conducive to them learning or to the population in general learning, then they should be dealing with that as opposed to just suspending the student, putting them away at an ALC. And when I say put them away, I don't mean to make it sound like they're just locking them away somewhere with nothing happening. There is learning still going on at the ALCs, however, it's not exactly the same thing as the quality you might get in your classroom, and the number of types of subjects you would get in your classrooms, you will not necessarily get at the ALC. So there is a loss in terms of what the student will be learning. My only dissent from you would be the nuance that there are students and families that are in such crisis that they are disruptive to the learning process for the other students that are in the class. And so something has to be done. And what I was just explaining was that we believe there should be more intervention, and of course there's not. I believe that, like Jeffrey Canada has put in his schools, is that there need to be more social workers in every school, along with caseworkers to work with those social workers, because until you work with those families, you're not going to be able to deal with that issue. That your child is not going to come to school ready to learn no matter how many times you suspend them. That is one of the big issues with the process that we have. There are too many suspensions in terms of an individual can have as many as 17 superintendent suspensions through their history of going through the public school system. And to me, that's a red flag. We know who they are, we know what's happening, but the system is doing nothing about it in terms of addressing other than disciplining the student. So for that, I absolutely agree with you. As far as stop and frisk, all the brothers have talked eloquently about it being illegal. I also am an attorney and agree, based on my understanding as a former sort of assistant district attorney, that there's nothing legal about the way it's being implemented in terms of the way they stop people, the reasons that they stop people, the excuses that Ray Kelly and the mayor are giving is that it's saved 5,000 lives, people who would have been murdered otherwise. There's no correlation to the numbers that they're using. There's no basis, in fact, for where they're getting this from, this extrapolation that they're making. There's no basis to determine that that could be true or not true. There could be they could have saved 1 life, or maybe 5, or maybe the whole 5,000 lives. However, the issue is that over the last couple of years, they've stopped over 600,000 Black and Latino people over the last couple of years. So now we're talking about several million people that have been stopped, some of them more than a couple of times. And so their civil rights are being violated in order to save a few lives. And what we understand as attorneys, when you're talking about constitutional issues, you always have several issues buttressing up against one another. In other words, your right to free speech buttresses up against somebody else's right for you not to yell fire in a crowded theater so that you're safe. Whenever we talk about issues with terrorism, your right to be free of terror and to be blown up in a streetcar or a bus or something like that is buttressed up against somebody else's right to association, their right to have their personal beliefs. And so there's always a balancing act that's going on. And right now, the way the mayor and the humorist that Kelly is showing is that this is just about, look, we think we got something that works, we don't give a damn whether it's constitutional or not constitutional, we're not being challenged. So we're gonna keep doing what we've been doing because we think it's successful. Right now, the New York City ACLU is challenging that in court. Fortunately, we've got a judge that has upheld their right to the class action and has talked about the hubris of the mayor's office and the arrogance in which they, one of the parts of their brief was that, look, even if they win, so what can we do? We can't stop the average police officer from doing what they do out there, which of course is an arrogant statement which says, well, you have no control over the department that you're running. So the only part I would make to sum this up is that while we can do these individual actions, civil rights attorney, when people are individually violated, gentlemen here, they can take those cases to court, but we'll never change the nature of what's going on except through the political system and by making our politicians accountable for what side they're on and making it and implementing the stopping of the stop and frisk. The idea is you're always going to have police officers with that kind of discretion. I don't care what rules you put into effect. The idea is, from the top down, are they allowing it to happen, or are they stepping in and disciplining officers with whom they find that this stuff occurs? And that's really where we're at, and making sure that our politicians are making it clear that it is not to be tolerated. And that's the only way we're going to change that in this city. It's going to be political, as well as people being out in the streets, letting the politicians know that we're serious about stopping this.
Right.
Thank you. Round of applause for the panel thus far. We're now going to questions. We gotta go to questions. Brother Kenny Gilbert, Attorney Kenny Gilbert is on the list, but he's involved in a murder case, so he can't be here. Also, Brother Bashir Muhammad, Attorney Bashir, he is on his way here, but will probably be out. He practices more in both New Jersey and in New York, so that, you know, it's a hustle in terms of getting there in time. So that's his situation. So we have questions. We have time for a few questions, because that's what this meeting is about. And I'm going to take this brother first, the sister second, the brother in the back. Try to make your questions to the point. Brother Hanif?
Yes, I would like to address this question to whomever probably one of the lawyers. I'm 66 years old, and I was doing, you know, about 3 weekends ago, what I've been doing for about 30 years, and that's trying to teach my people out on the street corner with a bullhorn and a police-approved sound permit. And 4 cops came up to me when the van was parked over on the side. This is in Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy. And 3 white cops and 1 black. And so they walked up to me. And the first question one of them says was, "Let me see your ID." So I was kind of, you know, I mean, being out over 30 years, I'm all over the place in New York City. You know, I've been approached probably at least 100 times or so, during all that time. So I'm saying, that's the first time anyone ever asked me for ID. So I said, you mean you want to see my police permit, correct? Oh, you have police permit? I said, yeah, sure. You think I'd be out here talking like this without one? Oh, I forgot to say, I'm a Muslim. Okay, so that makes a difference.
Right.
Yeah. So I pulls out the police permit from my pocket, and I gives it to him. So he says, well, I still need to see your ID. So I said, well, what do you need to see my ID for? I say, you probably, I've been approached at least maybe 100 times, and you're the very first policeman that's ever asked me for ID. They always want to see the police permit for the sound device. Oh, well, I have to check and make sure that the name is the same on the permit as it is. I said, well, my name is not on the permit. The permit is not issued to an individual. The permit is issued to an organization. I represent my mosque. I say, so anybody from my mosque can be out here with this permit, and it's valid, so, well, we got to check. So anyway, they check that. So I gave them my ID reluctantly. I hated to have to do it, and so they went, so to make it short, is that legal? What are my rights if they ask me for my ID? Do I have the right to refuse to give them my ID?
If the police ask you for ID, the police can ask you for ID. If you have the ID, it's a good deal to give them the ID and show it. But if you don't have the ID, it's not illegal to not have ID. So they can't arrest you. They can't put the cuffs on you because you don't have ID. But can they ask you for ID? Yes, they can ask you for ID. They can't arrest you for refusing to give ID, but you got to understand that the arrest charge won't be for refusing to give ID. The arrest charge will be for disorderly conduct, obstruction of justice, so forth, so on. But that, again, that's part of the problem in our community. And that's part of the problem with stop and frisk, especially our kids. When our kids get empowered and they understand their rights, because there are a lot of them out there, especially within the organizations that I run around with, like Take Back the Bronx, these kids know their rights. And when the cops come up to them, they're like indigos over the sun. They understand their rights and they're somewhat belligerent, but they're belligerent in a respectful way. But because of stop and frisk, because of what happened to Correll, remarkable. When our children put forth their rights, the cops get brutal. When the children say, you don't have the right to search me, trust me, they get searched. And again, you may have the right to refuse, but I'm telling you, what 9 times out of 10 will happen if it happens in our community, the arrest charge won't say, didn't refuse to give up ID. The arrest charge will say resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, obstruction of justice, and they'll come up with a story as to why they arrested you. Right or wrong, that's what they'll do. That's what they'll do to you. So if you have your ID, I talk to kids. I talk to kids all the time. And one of the things I tell them is I want to tell you to tell the cops that you're jumping away. But I know in telling you that's putting you in danger. And I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to do that here either. Because even though we're older than the kids that they usually harass, our skin color is still the same. And we're still dealing with the same mentality when we're dealing with the officers. They don't see our age, they see our skin color. So if I tell you, you don't have to, because you don't, you still run that risk of being thrown up against the wall. You still run that risk of being falsely arrested and lied on. And you know when you go to court, it's the judge trying to figure out who they're trying to believe, either you or the cop. And 99.9% of the time, it ain't you.
Thank you. We're moving quickly along because of time, not disrespect. So your questions have to be Right on point.
Thank you. I'm Sanchez Bay. I live right down here in the SRO called Gemma Hall. Okay, first I wanted just a clarification. What is ALC? Just for clarification.
Well, that's the alternative learning.
Okay, alternative learning. And this K2 that you were talking about, what's that? When they were talking about potpourri and K2?
Oh, yeah, those are new synthetic drugs that are.
Okay, but my real question, I had to write it down. I don't know if you can answer this for me, but you know that they built a charter school right next door to the SRO that I live in. Now, some people have records and all that, as you stated, right? And people have served their time and it's done. But some of the crimes were violent and against youth, okay? So, my question is this, it's like a double question. How can they close Rice High School on that corner? And then at the same time that we're petitioning and begging to please not close that school, right next door they're building another charter school, and allegedly it's going to be for females. And then they told us that this entrance would not be used because of our SRO. However, it would be there. Can they do that? And what can we do to, what's happening? It's really a question. Thank you.
Well, the first problem with Rice High School is that's a Catholic school, it's a private school. Oh, it's a private school. So if the Catholics feel that they can no longer support the school because of the tuition they charge or whatever their reason is, they have a right to close it. The second problem is the issue of, and it's a very difficult issue, it's a very nuanced issue, and that is charter schools, period. The only problem I have with charter schools in terms of the way they're being addressed in the community is that this is the alternative that's going to make all the difference in your children's lives. You've got people lined up around the block. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good, and others of them are terrible. The overall record for charter schools, and I pay a lot of attention to this, is that they're not doing that much better than public schools in general. Now, there are individual schools you can pick out where they're doing outstanding work, and they should be supported to a certain extent. However, the other problem I have is comparing charter schools with public schools like for me it's an apples and oranges comparison, but they're always compared to as if they're both apples and apples, if we're comparing apples and apples. Very quickly, one of the big differences between the charter school and the public school is, first of all, there are a lot of differences, but the biggest one is that if a student is suspended at a charter school, or their family is not following the charter school rules, or the kid is not coming dressed the way they suspect them, or performing the way they want, what they do is by October, that kid is gone. Because they get the money by October for that child, then they get rid of them, and guess where that child ends up? In the public school system. We're the school of last resort, just like the bank of last resort. There's no telling the kid he can't go to his local school. And so what happens is the public schools are becoming the grounds for those students and parents who have the issues that have not been dealt with and the schools are not dealing with. And so the local public schools records and what they're dealing with goes down, they look very bad, they get the F. And the charter school looks decent, if not great. Okay, so that's one of the things. All right.
So I just wanted to add a couple of things. One, we have to always remember, we talk about the budget, right? So we have to remember that New York City is a $70 billion budget. The Department of Education is $23 billion. So your mayor, when he purchased and made sure he got another term, it was to make sure that he was in office to continue projects that were not completed during the first 2 terms. So what that has done now is put him in a position for contracts. We can never forget contracts. So whenever we talk about budget, it's always about where the money is going. So whenever we say, don't allow anybody to tell you that we don't have the money. The money is there. It's what we do with the money and how we allow it to be allocated. So when it comes to the charter school movement and the charter school issue, it's about the money and being able to give money to certain people who are coming into our community. So it's our responsibility to translate that to to our brothers and sisters who believe, because you know, anytime you want somebody to join in your fight, you have to create a sense of fear. And I know this because I was the president of the school board in District 5 here, and I can remember when Chancellor Crew was here, he was actually saying to us, giving us data that said our schools were overcrowded. And I know I took a look at all these schools, I was like, what are you talking about? He was saying our schools were underutilized. They were overcrowded. So why are you giving us this false data? So it was to create this environment, to not give resources to our schools so they would fail. And now the parents would say, I don't want to send my child to the neighborhood school. I want them to go to this charter school because they made it sound so great. So it's our responsibility to educate our brothers and sisters about this. Go back to what Kafani was saying about mayoral control, because it's been 10 years, so he's had millions of dollars to be able to prove that he can educate our children, 1.1 million each year, and he's not. So our role now has to be calling for ending mayoral control and then putting in place the People's Board of Education.
Thank you very much.
And a third question in the back, didn't we?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the gentleman, when I came in a little late, I would like to know for your names again, a contact number, and also the high schools that are being closed by the Board of Education, can they be used by the community for establishing where collectively our teenagers and youth could give meetings on stop and frisk, because it's larger, they're empty, they're not being used. And,
Okay,
you know, it's like the armory at 142nd Street. You know, maybe about 5,000 people. Anyway, that can be used, because kids are getting out the 26th or 27th of June. And a lot of them is not going to be working, you understand? And they'll be out in the streets, and this is a collective meeting where they can all be pulled in. This is enough room. This message could get out much, much quicker.
Okay, we have business cards up front. Brother Marshall, you have your cards? You have your cards, right? And Brother Bosley or Bosley? Bosley. And Brother Antonio, the cards are up here, so at the end of the meeting, you get your card. This brother was 4.
Thank you. Question? Absolutely. Okay, my name is Armando. I'm with an organization called the Temple of Hip Hop. It's an international organization towards the preservation of hip hop culture and its elements. So this question is directed more for hip hoppers in general. What advice would you give to conscious hip hoppers when confronted with a stop and frisk search, not only in Harlem but in America, knowing that they do not have anything considered illegal on their person, and number 2, can they be confiscated, or can any property on their person be confiscated, and that's it.
I'm the real father of hip hop. The reality is, there's a very simple process that you go through when you're stopped by the police. 1, remain calm at all times. 2, get a name and a badge number. 3, you can ask that a supervisor be present. All right? 4, if you have a video or a camera or something, if you can, record it. Pictures worth 1,000 words. I think, what's the brother's name in LA? Rodney King? Well, that Rodney King, the video, well, it didn't help the criminal case, but it certainly helped the civil case. But it did help the criminal case when it went to the federal court. But the reality is, if you can record it, record it. Certainly, you have to, as conscious hip hoppers, you have to be informed about what the law is. Can they take something from you? Legally, they cannot take anything from you if it's not contraband, if it's not illegal. But if you have their names and their badge numbers, you can then, of course, follow that up with either a complaint to the CCRB, which I never recommend, or you can hire a lawyer to pursue your claim against the city. I mean, you may think that is trivial, just to stop. In the minds of young people, it's not worth my time because I got to go see a lawyer, I got to go do that. But ultimately, the impact is much greater than just how it impacts you. It's disruptive to the entire community. I mean, 600,000 people were stopped illegally, and in fact, one of those guys who was stopped, I actually bumped into him on the train, and he wanted to fight me because he couldn't take out his anger on the cop that stopped him. I said, what are you so angry about? Fucking cop stopped me, man. I'm angry at everybody now. And you look like you support the cops. Because I got a suit and tie. But the reality is, it's very disruptive to our community, and you have to be empowered with information, which is the reason why you're here. Take down the badge numbers. If they don't want to show you the badge numbers, because a lot of them hide the badge numbers, you just take down the number of the car and you say we're in, and that can trace it back to the officers. If they're in an unmarked vehicle, you can get the license plates. You just have to be persistent. Someone used the word persistent. You have to be dogged about this. You got to be dogged. Oh, there's a great guy in Harlem right now. Who I represented on at least 3 cases. Not jazz. But, he's routinely stopped by the 26th precinct, and we sued the 26th precinct 3 times. And guess what? They coughed it up 3 times. But in their minds, at some point he's going to give up. And in his mind, he's determined to fight this to the end. And he knows the whole process. By the way, if you have a lawyer, okay, if you have the name of a lawyer, call that lawyer as things are evolving. Or if not, call that lawyer shortly afterwards with the information when it's fresh in your mind. And don't just talk about it in the barbershop or the beauty salons or wherever else. People like to talk about horrific events mixed with sports. You talk about it with a sense of how we're resolving this. Get other people involved. Right?
Where does persistence become a threat to a quote-unquote peace officer?
Persistence, well, I don't, that's a kind of a vague question, but if you're asking me, if asking a question of an officer persistently is perceived as a threat, well, I would say, well, I'm exercising my First Amendment right, okay? And I don't think that you could ever exercise your constitutional rights too much. I think we underutilize that. And of course, the first thing they say to you is when you ask the question, who you being a smartass, or you think you're a lawyer, or this or that, and then they get you into thinking that you're doing something wrong. And I would submit to you that you have to use your good judgment. You know what I mean? If they don't want to give it up, you can always take it to the next level. You got the information that's needed, either the badge number or the automobile number. Then you follow it up by contacting a lawyer, or if you want to go personally and do that bad, just stop. You don't need my number. How do you give up your rights to sue? Well, you give up your rights to sue in the instance of a criminal case by pleading guilty. In many instances, when you plead guilty, you've waived your rights to sue civilly. The other way you give up your rights not to sue is really just not doing anything about it. Oh, ACD. Oh, the ACD. I understand now. ACD. Well, a German contemplation of dismissal is a bonus that Negroes and Puerto Ricans have been taught to believe is the alternative, is the best alternative to the situation that they might be in when they're in court. The reality is that ACD only undermines one aspect of a civil rights claim, the malicious prosecution piece. Accepting an ACD is not the worst thing in the world, depending on the facts of the case. So I'm not going to sit here and say that taking an ACD is a bad decision in every case. It has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. But even if you take an ACD, if you've been savagely beaten by a cop and you still have your Fourth Amendment claim, you still have your excessive force claim, you still have your First Amendment claim in many instances because a lot of times they charge you with disorderly conduct or obstruction of governmental administration, and that's usually a function of you asking an intelligent question. You Negroes and Puerto Ricans are not permitted to ask intelligent questions to officers. And unfortunately, we accept that. We accept that, and we accept that at a very early age because we're not teaching critical analytical skills in the schools. We're not teaching good communication skills in the schools. We're not teaching, we're not even teaching civics. The four C's that I talked about, collaboration, creativity, critical analytical skills, and communication. We're not teaching those skills in school. If we got that, then then we know how to deal appropriately when we're confronted with those crisis situations. And last point, and we've said this before, the stop and frisk is just a microcosm of a larger problem. Every person here has said something that underscores the conditions in which our communities are suffering. Okay, and we have to get a grasp over all of these paradigms, and we're not going to do it individually. We have to continue to come to forums like this. We have to act collectively, okay, and do the things that are necessary that are going to bolster our community and take us into the 21st and to the 22nd century. Cornelius is going to wind it up.
We at the end, Sister Aisha Sekou from an activist has something to say. I'm sorry we can't take the questions via 10 minutes out of you.
Peace and blessings, family. I really came to listen, and Cornelius asked if I would say something. So usually when I get the opportunity to do that, I try to speak on behalf of young people. I'm in school 5 days a week. And I can almost tell you almost every single day, there's a young man, black or Latino in particular, and sometimes a young woman that comes in that has been stopped, frisked, searched, thrown on the ground, and even though they say they don't carry billy clubs, they have this black thing that they take out and they hit these kids with. So we know that stop and frisk is the issue, but what young people are experiencing is that stop and frisk is the first point of contact with the officer. And so what happens beyond the stop and frisk takes them into the twilight zone, can change their entire life, can bring things to them that they didn't expect in that day, only because they were stopped, frisked, and searched. And what we usually find is that that same young person was stopped, frisked, and searched last week, maybe twice, the week before once, the week before 3 times. And so you mentioned a young man who there was a pattern and he sued. Well, this is a pattern with a lot of young people. The other thing that I just want to make really clear, let me tell you why I was saying that. I was saying that to say that we look at the spirit of our young people and we wonder what happened to them and why they are behaving the way that they do and why there's so much resistance and attitude and all of that. It is the result of all of these things that they have to live with, and they get caught up in this court system, and they have the parent that never comes because the parent automatically assumes, and I'm telling you this on purpose so that you will tell other people, do not assume that the young people are wrong because they have taken it to be stopped, frisked, searched, and arrested as part of their every single day life. So have their parents, and the parents don't show up anymore. And sometimes they say, well, Miss Aisha, could you come? I get a phone call at 11 o'clock and I got to go to a precinct because the parent doesn't come. So our kids in the context of what their environment has become and two, what their everyday life is. I mean, when you say after people once in a while would be the story in the barbershop. Now, that ain't even the story anymore. They stop and frisk, search, and going to the precinct. It's so commonplace, they talking about other stuff. And this is common with our young people, so I want to make sure that I'm clear about that. So I'm telling you that to say we need to have constant conversation, constant teaching with our young people wherever they are. Barbershop, corner, grocery store. I hear them talking about, I get in the conversation. I say, yeah, tell me more about that. And let them tell me so then I can tell them where they can go, who they can talk to, and give them hope because they feel hopeless. They really feel hopeless, like nothing will be done. And I guess the last thing that I just want to make sure I say on behalf of young people is that we have to not just take badge numbers, not just take car license plates and what precinct. We have to hold the police department accountable. And the police department right now is trying to do the best PR that they could possibly do. I get more phone calls from, more phone calls from police officers trying to do good PR. Oh, Aisha, can we do this with you? Can you come and do that? Because they want the voices, to shut up. We cannot shut up. It doesn't mean we don't create good community, but we have to hold them accountable. Hold them accountable, call Commissioner Kelly, call his liaison, Detective Brown, and continue to email him. If you email Commissioner Kelly, he's going to call that commander and say, what is this? And I'm tired of getting this from your precinct. So it goes from the commissioner's office back to the precinct in which it happened. And that's how the Inspector Catalina was moved from the 3-2. So it does work because we did it. So I just want to say that. Thank you, Brother.
Yeah.